Thank you for joining us today for the ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice Section's Rapid Response Program, How Things Work, the Legal Edition. This program addresses how actions taken by the new administration are impacting our civil rights and is not legal advice. My name is Casey Carter Swegman, and I am the Director of Public Policy at the Tahirih Justice Center, where I lead our state and federal advocacy to safeguard and improve upon legal protections for immigrant survivors of gender-based violence. I also serve as the liaison between Tahirih's Forced Marriage Initiative and the ABA Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence. The Forced Marriage Initiative provides direct services to survivors of forced and child marriage nationwide and is funded by the Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women as the national training and technical assistance provider on forced marriage. I'm thrilled to welcome you to this conversation. These videos are a unique opportunity to discuss what is happening in America today, clarify any misinformation or disinformation that is out there, and address how civil rights and social justice advocates can act to help promote the rights of the public. Today's topic, the state of gender-based asylum in the United States, is more critical than ever. Immigrant survivors of domestic and sexual violence, human trafficking, forced and child marriage, and other gender-based persecution deserve to seek safety within a just and equitable asylum process, consistent with the principles that guide the work of our section and the ABA generally. We are honored to have with us Irena Sullivan, Senior Immigration Policy Counsel at the Tahirih Justice Center and Tahirih's liaison to the ABA Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence. Ms. Sullivan is a former director of the ABA Commission on Immigration and Associate Counsel at the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Office of the Chief Counsel. Her long-standing expertise and dedication to serving and advocating for survivors of gender-based violence has made her a leader in the field, and we are grateful for the time she is giving us to share her insights. So let's dive in. Irena, can you first give us a little background on asylum generally?
Sure. As some may know, our asylum statute was modeled after the United Nations Refugee Convention of 1951. It is meant to shield people from deportation if they fear persecution in their home country. Persecution does not include random acts of violence, though. It must be inflicted to punish a person for having certain specific traits. So, if you face a threat to your life or freedom at home, you can only seek asylum if the threat is because of your race, religion, political opinion, nationality, or membership in a particular social group.
Okay, so what about claims involving violence against women and other gender-based harm like domestic violence or sexual assault?
Well, notably, gender or sex is not among the protected traits listed in either our asylum statute or the convention. The UN and convention countries do, however, read the convention as protecting people from sex or gender-based harm under a catch-all category called particular social group. Nonetheless, the U.S. has been inconsistent in accepting asylum claims involving domestic and sexual violence, and outcomes have largely depended on the whims of judges and the executive.
Okay. So can you talk about the laws and policies on gender-based asylum that this current administration has implemented in that context?
The administration is using case law, regulations, and sub-regulatory guidance to try to prohibit survivors of domestic violence in particular from even applying for asylum on that basis. The view that domestic violence cannot be a basis for asylum is driven by the idea that it is simply a private matter and even normal or inevitable if you are a wife or simply female. This approach is antithetical to our anti-discrimination laws, which name sex as a protected trait and recognize that misogyny is a systemic form of harm, like racism or religious discrimination. We know from victims and abusers themselves that women and girls are deliberately harmed for being female in many cases. But without a clearly named ground of asylum for sex or gender, it is more and more difficult to fight back against narrow interpretations and policies.
Wow. Okay. So you're saying that even in the context of broader attempts to undermine U.S. asylum and the asylum program itself, gender-based claims are facing a specific and targeted attack. Do you know how all of this is impacting survivors' rights on the ground right now?
Yes, unfortunately, survivors fleeing domestic violence are having a very difficult time accessing the asylum process at all, let alone actually being able to apply for asylum. When they first arrive, they face a confusing system all alone. Most do not even know they can apply because the asylum application makes no mention of sex or gender as a basis for protection. They could, in theory, try to apply as a member of a particular social group, but this term is so vague. It is nearly impossible to imagine someone who is deeply traumatized, exhausted, with no knowledge of our legal system, and in need of a translator, knowing that they have a right to do so. And if a survivor does ask to apply upon arrival in the US, many are told by Immigration or Border Patrol officers that they simply aren't eligible before they even try. Those who do end up applying face tremendous odds, even if they manage to hire expert legal counsel to represent them. And survivors without counsel comprise the majority of asylum seekers, and they have a virtually 0% chance of winning, even if they do make it to the application stage.
Wow. Okay. So that leaves me wondering if this is the situation right now, can you speak to how U.S. asylum claims involving domestic violence may have been treated in the past?
Yes, and this is a really important question because even before recent attempts to roll back asylum for women and girls, sex-based claims were subject to extra burdens compared to others. So, the particular social group framework that I've been talking about that is most often used for these claims is inherently complex and multi-tiered. For example, a survivor fleeing domestic violence must first prove that the social group she belongs to is in fact a legally recognizable group. By contrast, an asylum claim based on a persecuted person's race or religion typically requires no further analysis to establish that that person's race or religion actually is a race or a religion. And for a social group to be recognized, it has to meet several specific requirements. It must be defined by particularity, social distinction, and immutable characteristics. It cannot be solely defined circularly by the harm itself, and it can't be too big or too small. So you get the idea. The determination is made on a case-by-case basis, but in general, groups like women, taxi drivers, or wealthy people fail to satisfy these requirements. At that point, if the judge does accept the particular social group, the applicant has to prove that their persecutor specifically targeted them because of their membership in the group. This is tricky with claims involving domestic violence. And making a survivor articulate in detail what she perceives to be her abuser's motive in harming her and why she thinks so can be a re-traumatizing and impossibly absurd task. This is especially the case with sexual violence. This inquiry often puts the victim's response to trauma under a microscope as well, with victim blaming as a common byproduct. Another key point is that when a perpetrator of domestic violence is a private actor, as opposed to a member of the government or the military, for example, a survivor must show that she tried to get help from the police but was turned away. Ironically, unsuccessfully calling the police strengthens a survivor's asylum claim, yet calling can actually be even more dangerous than not calling at times.
My goodness. So, I mean, it's obvious that survivors are facing tremendous barriers to safety and justice within our asylum system right now. That's a lot that you just unpacked for us, and I know there is so much more to it, and this is what we do day in and day out. But in the interest of time, can we turn to what lawyers and advocates can do to address challenges for asylum seekers on an individual level right now?
Yes, unfortunately, it is increasingly difficult for survivors to find lawyers to take their cases since they are hard to win and involve prolonged appeals, and detention centers where clients are held are often in less populated areas across the country, making case preparation a real challenge. But there are organizations like Tahirih that provide direct representation to survivors seeking asylum, and we are also happy to provide technical assistance, share our knowledge, provide sample briefs, and referrals to other organizations doing similar work. We do have offices in Virginia, Maryland, Georgia, Texas, and California.
Thank you. And I know you talked about this, but at the end of the day, it sounds like there are just not enough expert attorneys to go around for survivors seeking asylum in this country to have a fair and equal shot at safety here. So, in that context, what can be done on a more systemic level?
Yeah, what we really need is legislative change to ensure survivors have meaningful and enduring access to protection. We must amend our statute to clarify the particular social group ground and the standard for establishing the motive of a persecutor. The Refugee Protection Act includes these fixes, but they are not enough on their own to help the most vulnerable survivors, since we are talking about people without lawyers. So, what we really need is to name sex as a ground of asylum in our statute once and for all. This will make it much harder for judges or any future executive to eliminate gender-based asylum, as we are seeing now. A sixth ground for sex or gender also puts violence against women on equal footing with other forms of violence and persecution. The idea of domestic violence as a basis for asylum has always sparked an unfounded and unique concern that all women will then somehow get asylum. However, certain races, religions, and nationalities are represented by over half the population in other countries, and curiously, similar concerns over these grounds of asylum have not been raised. The fact is that many other convention countries have now named sex as a ground of asylum without controversy or harm, and it is past time for us to do the same.
Thank you. I think you've made a really strong argument today, and I just have one final question before we wrap up, because I imagine folks watching this want to know what resources are available for service providers trying to navigate all of this with their clients and what everyday people can do to help.
Yes, if you are interested in advocating for the legislative fixes I spoke about, you can definitely email me directly about joining Tahirih's movement for gender asylum justice. We have so many incredible partners already, but the larger the coalition grows, the clearer it becomes to Congress that there is broad support for these fixes. You can see the movement's list of partners, statement of principles, and an in-depth report, which includes what survivors themselves are saying, and other resources on our website at tahirih.org. You can also join the Alliance for Immigrant Survivors to stay up to date on the status of relevant legislation and resources on how best to support survivors right now. That website is immigrantsurvivors.org.
Thank you so much, Irena, for shedding light on what is happening here and how it's impacting immigrant survivors and our communities as a whole right now. We know that a strong, resilient society is one that takes care of its most vulnerable members. And I'm always so incredibly grateful for your ability to distill down such a complex topic into a digestible format like this. And critically, for not just naming the problem, but sharing solutions which provide a critical roadmap for change. For those folks watching, if you'd like additional resources on this topic, I encourage you to visit Tahirih's Movement for Gender Asylum Justice homepage and for your organization to join that movement. For everyone watching this today, thank you for being a part of this important dialogue. The issues we explored are complex and challenging, but by coming together in spaces like this, we're taking meaningful steps towards progress. Remember, the work doesn't stop here. It continues with the actions we take in our communities, our workplaces, and within the ABA. I encourage you to stay engaged with the ABA's Civil Rights and Social Justice section and become a member if you aren't one already. Visit the website, explore upcoming events, and consider joining one of their committees to help shape the work they are doing. You can do that at americanbar.org/groups/CRSJ. Once again, thank you for watching. Thank you for the work you do every day and for your resolve to keep fighting for justice. Together, I know we can and will continue to make a difference. Thank you.